Have you ever really taken a close look at a pair of Havaianas? Flip-flops, unlike sneakers or loafers, don't require the same type of craftsmanship to be produced, or so it would seem. But the truth is, the more you peel back the layers of what makes Havaianas flip-flops so special, the more you realize how much craft, culture, and history is a part of these shoes' story. The fashion media apparatus is trying to play a trick on you about the current flip-flop trend. A trick they pull far too often that attempts to lure you into buying what's in and completely ignores the origin of the fashion. Beyond the cool outfits we see on our feed, Havaianas is a brand that speaks to the connections of culture. From Japan to Brazil, and of course Hawaii, this is the story of how Havaianas became the most valuable flip-flop in the world. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Drew. What it do? It's nice to meet you. Let's talk Havaianas.
Tereza Colo usa imitação barata das novas Havaianas top. E eu tenho que tomar o maior cuidado. Porque imprensa e imitação barata estão doidinhos para pegar a gente.
It'd be obvious to assume that the beginning of the Havaianas story starts in Brazil. But in reality, it actually starts in Scotland. See, in the late 1800s, Robert Fraser and the Fraser family had made a name for themselves selling sailcloth to the British Navy under a company called Douglas Fraser and Sons. Things were going well for the Fraser family up until the invention of the steam engine, rendering the need for sailcloth essentially obsolete. A classic tale of how the progress of technology both creates and destroys industry. This period of time was difficult for the Fraser family, but Robert Fraser decided to turn their misfortune into, well, fortune. He decided to relocate his textile engineering expertise to Argentina, where he founded the eventual legendary footwear manufacturing company, Alpargatas. With the help of his brother and wealthy British financiers, he grew this new company from Argentina to Uruguay and eventually made his way to Brazil. And on June 14th, 1962, Alpargatas invented Havaianas, a flip-flop designed to meet the needs of working-class Brazilians. The inspiration for Havaianas comes from two specific places, Japan and Hawaii. In fact, Havaianas is the Portuguese way to say Hawaiians, and the initial design inspiration for these flip-flops came from Japanese Zori sandals, whose influence is directly tied to a wave of Japanese immigrants that came to Brazil due to ethnic persecution, job shortages, and the enactment of the 1907 Brazil-Japan Immigration Treaty. But instead of rice straw soles like in Japan, the company used rubber and a PVC strap, two materials that were better suited to withstand the Brazilian weather. One of the coolest nods to the Zori that Havaianas did keep was the rice grain texture. If you look at the outsole, you can see how this texture mirrors that of the traditional Zori. And when you flip the flops around and look at the footbed, it looks like little tiny grains of rice lined up. Now, I don't know if they did that on purpose, but I'd like to think so. When Havaianas got its start in Brazil, it was really only meant as functional footwear for everyday life. The crazy thing is, the original sandal only came in one color, but the flip-flops were still a hit. And within a year, Alpargatas was selling 1,000 Havaianas a day until eventually the brand controlled 90% of the market. But you're probably wondering how they did this with only one color. Well, in 1969, there was a machine malfunction at the factory which produced a batch of green Havaianas. People loved them, and it inspired the company to slowly start experimenting with other styles and colors. But because Havaianas were so popular throughout Brazil, it started to develop a copycat problem. At first, imitations were cheap and uninteresting versions of the original Havaianas flip-flops. But as these replicas got better, Havaianas went from being perceived as the shoe of the everyday person to the poor man's shoe, forcing Alpargatas to try to reclaim its image. Counterfeiters in the 80s and 90s were beginning to eat into the sales, as well as slowly eroding the brand image of Havaianas. So this is what they did. In 1994, Havaianas embarked on one of the most ambitious rebrand marketing strategies in the history of footwear. They started slowly and then all at once with the goal to reposition Havaianas as a fashion statement. This is when we get Havaianas Top, the brand's first monochromatic sandal in various color schemes. Havaianas top was a big hit and things seemed to be turning around for the company. But what added even more fuel to the fire is what they did next. The 1998 World Cup saw Havaianas make another marquee design change to their iconic flip-flop. By adding the Brazilian flag to their strap as a promotional pair for the Brazilian team, the shoes became a symbol of national pride, Brazilian cool, and innovative design. This moment helped Havaianas begin to ignite global interest around their footwear. And then, when Jean-Paul Gaultier featured them during the brand's 1999 runway show in Paris, it set off a chain of events that catapulted the brand to even greater heights. The flip-flops stopped being seen as working class shoes and started being seen as legitimate fashion-forward footwear. And then once American celebrities like Kim Kardashian, surfing legend Kelly Slater, Nicole Richie, so many others were seen in these flip-flops, it made Havaianas unquestionably one of the most sought-after footwear brands on planet Earth. It was mission accomplished for the brand. And from the 90s to the 2000s, Havaianas went from being known as Brazil's everyday shoe to one of the most unique and highly desirable fashion flip-flops to ever be created. Last video, we talked about the split that ended up creating Converse US and Converse Japan. And the reason why I bring that up is because one of the cool things about Havaianas is that they're still made and manufactured in Brazil. Throughout the 2000s into the 2010s, Havaianas has grown and grown and grown. Maybe not as obvious as something like a Nike or an On Cloud, but nonetheless, it kind of brings us to where we are today with its current resurgence in 2026. If you check the latest fashion magazine tabloids, you'll see that flip-flops are in fashion. Balenciaga, Miu Miu, The Row, even Jound has a pair of flippity flops. In menswear, the styling feels very novel for a couple of reasons. No longer are flip-flops being confined to beach cities or regions. In London, New York, Copenhagen, and other non-beachy cities, you can see that the coolest kids are trying out flip-flops. In women's wear, the styling is getting bolder. Isabel Marant's Havaianas are a great example of this. Havaianas has leaned even more into collaborations, especially within the last 10 years. From the Guimaguas Havaianas to Valentino and so many others, brand partnerships have been a key strategy to keep Havaianas flip-flops relevant in the modern era. I also think that increasing temperatures are a part of the new flip-flop wave. The hotter it gets outside, the harder it gets to justify wearing clothes that don't make staying cool while looking cool possible. Havaianas offer a cool relief in the summer while providing fun styling. One of the biggest critiques that some might have for Havaianas is the fact that they turned their back on common Brazilians in the 90s and started targeting wealthier clientele with the goal to no longer be known as this poor man or common man's flip-flop. In a way, some see Havaianas as a company that built its initial fortune on the backs of common working class people. And then when this audience no longer served the brand's greater vision, they discarded them for a brand new audience. Now, some might push back on that and say, well, Havaianas has always been relatively affordable for the common Brazilian, and then if you want to splurge on a pair of flip-flops, you have the collaborations, you have the expensive Havaianas, you have the things that are more fashion forward. They didn't completely eliminate the market for the common man Havaianas. But based on the research we've done, I think Havaianas has done more good for Brazil than bad. I happen to think that cultural symbols are important, and fashion can undeniably be a vehicle for conversations for social change or different practices that exist within a nation. The sales generated from these flip-flops are a huge injection of capital into the Brazilian economy. Havaianas sells over 200 million flip-flops every single year. They employ over 20,000 people, and they are firmly an over $1 billion company. That's insane. Not very many footwear brands are billion-dollar plus companies. Now, that's not to say that there aren't controversies that surround the brand, especially when we're talking about Brazilian government, and especially when we're talking about inequity in a billion-dollar company, looking at the salaries of maybe the CEO versus the majority of the factory workers or majority of the team that actually works on making Havaianas possible. I don't want to be one-sided when talking about this story, so I'm curious, what other legitimate, valid criticisms do you have about the company, especially if you're in Brazil or if you have any insight into that? I would love to know what you think down below. If you're enjoying this video up until this point, be sure to like and subscribe. It's an easy and free way to support the channel. And between you and me, we have more fun stories coming up like this in future uploads.
Legítimas só Havaianas.
Nós estamos aqui para celebrar a união de um povo e uma sandália.
Eu amo Havaianas.
Nós estaremos sempre juntos.
I think part of the reason Havaianas has been able to maintain market dominance for such a long time is because they pivoted when it mattered most in that 90s, 2000s time period. Without the 90s rebrand that it did, it would have never been able to gain the global recognition that it currently has. And what's really interesting is that the moment you start to peer into the playbook of Havaianas, you start to see how other brands like Crocs also have taken pages out of the Havaianas playbook, turning something that was never really considered fashionable into bona fide fashion trend. I also think Havaianas has leaned into its lore. The stories that you read from the 60s about Havaianas, they get kind of crazy. Like the factory that accidentally made a batch of green Havaianas, and then that was the thing that sparked the growth and the different experimentation with the colors. Like that's a really cool story. And I read another one where in the early days of Havaianas, they used to sell these flip-flops out of vans and with street vendors, and it was very like word of mouth and local, and it was grassroots. To do that and then grow a over $100 million, billion-dollar business is crazy. These stories, these elements help the brand feel more symbolic and less corporate. They're a symbol of Brazilian pride. They're not this corporate juggernaut that's trying to eat everything. Something I've been keeping from you throughout this entire video is the underlying secret to Havaianas' rubber. Like Coca-Cola, Havaianas has a secret recipe that they've never divulged that they believe has been the competitive edge that has helped maintain their market dominance for so many years. It's even been rumored that competitors like Ipanema and Reef have tried to recreate the rubber formula that makes the Havaianas flip-flop so nice. I couldn't really find much legitimacy behind this rumor, and I don't really know what makes the rubber for Havaianas better or worse or different from other companies. I didn't go down that rabbit hole, but it's stories like that that help, like I said, increase the lore of Havaianas and make it feel like it's bigger than just, you know, numbers and corporate outcomes. Personally, I've never really been a big flip-flop wearer, but as summers, like I said before, seemingly are getting hotter and hotter, I think it's a style that deserves a little bit more play in my wardrobe. I know that there is something that's bothering the Brazilians. All the Brazilians that are watching this video are probably like throwing their Havaianas at their TV screen or at their phone right now. And it's the way I've been pronouncing Havaianas. In the West and in English, obviously the H isn't silent when you say something like Havaianas, but in Portuguese, if you were to pronounce Havaianas, you don't say Havaianas, you say Havaianas. Havaianas. So all the times you heard me say Havaianas, the correct pronunciation is Havaianas. I had to add that to this video. I recorded the entire video before really paying attention to the pronunciation, and I made a short form piece of content about this whole story, and then a lot of people were commenting, Drew, give the Brazilian, the Portuguese way, like a pronunciation. And yeah, this is me doing that. Havaianas. Havaianas, how am I doing, folks? All my Brazilians, Havaianas. Havaianas. Not Havaianas. I guess unless you're in, you know, the US or Australia or Europe, English-speaking places. Havaianas. Do you own a pair of Havaianas? And if so, which ones? Or do you own another pair, an Ipanema, a pair of Crocs, or some other kind of sandal-esque footwear? I would love to know down in the comments. And if I missed anything in the Havaianas story, let me know that down below as well. Enrich the community, do it in a kind way. You know, this is all about growth, learning. I don't think people understand this, but this channel is all about helping people understand the world so that they can make more informed decisions, but it's also about feeding into this positive energy and this force for good and trying to be a force for good for the world. And so if you have a comment, if you have something you want to say, I would advise you, or I would recommend you to say it in a kind way so that, whatever comes out of this interaction, this video, it's something that's positive, which is why I always say at the end of my videos, as always, I'm spreading peace, love, and positivity in 2026. So that means I hope peace, love, and positivity are in your mix. Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful rest of your day. Abianto. Peace. Yo, what is good? Post-vid. Here's the fist bump for the one time. Give me a fist bump, bro. Bah! Thank you so much for staying to the end of the video. Here's the second fist bump for the one time. Here we go. Bah! I appreciate you so much. As per the tradition of the PVV, I have a question for you. Hashtag PVV when you answer. Do you own a pair of flip-flops for the beach, or do you not even live near a beach? If you own a pair of flip-flops or sandals or slides, let me know what version they are down below. I'm very curious. These are my first pair of Havaianas. I got them in a very interesting kind of way. I'll say that for right now. And we're going to test them out. I want to know. Obviously, I've been talking about Birkenstocks. I've talked about sandals. I grew up playing basketball. We had slides. Let me know what your choice of sandal, slide, casual, leisure footwear is down below. Hashtag PVV when you answer. We'll see you in the next video. Appreciate you guys. PVV, man, I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you guys. We'll see you in the next video. What else is there to say? Bye, peace, choose, love.